This jewel was meant to symbolize a burgeoning nation, yet it ignited a century of animosity and became shrouded in state secrecy. Have you ever heard of a hostage treasure? A priceless heirloom entrusted to an ally, only to vanish into a century of silence and political intrigue? Today, we're not just discussing a tiara. We're talking about a masterpiece that first broke one queen's heart, then became the signature accessory of another, Europe's most dazzling monarch. And then, it simply vanished. What became of it? Was it secretly sold off to fund a global revolution? Was it ruthlessly dismantled for its stones, then melted down in the cellars of the Kremlin? Or perhaps, is it still intact, hidden away in the depths of the Moscow Kremlin, serving as Russia's most closely guarded secret? I've pieced together all the facts, all the whispers, every diplomatic note and eyewitness account. We'll follow this treasure's blood-stained trail, from the opulent ballrooms of Bucharest to the war-torn streets of Moscow. Watch this video to the very end, and I promise you this: you'll uncover the shocking truth about the most tragic fate in the history of royal jewels. And the central question we'll answer: was the tiara destroyed? Or is it still waiting somewhere for its moment, guarding the dark secrets of two royal courts? Within the annals of European royal treasures, certain legends exist whose brilliance doesn't dim with time, but rather shines ever brighter through the mists of bygone eras. Among them lies one shrouded in particular mystery: the story of the pearl tiara that graced the heads of two Romanian queens. It's not merely a piece of jewelry, it's a phantom, frozen in old, faded photographs, a silent witness to the triumphs and downfalls of a dynasty whose destiny proved as tragic as its own. We see it in portraits: 16 flawless pearls, seemingly suspended above an intricate, open-work base of diamond volutes. Its lines are austere yet majestic, imbued with a cool, aristocratic confidence. It was crafted as a symbol of power and succession, a crowning glory for a nascent monarchy seeking its place on the map of Europe. Two queens, so different in temperament, Elizabeth the poetess and Marie the regal beauty, wore it, weaving the luster of pearls and diamonds into the tapestry of their personal histories. But what if, beyond this ceremonial splendor and aristocratic dignity, lies not merely a story of ownership, but a true drama of loss, political intrigue, and silent oblivion? What if this treasure, having outlived generations on the throne, proved powerless against the storm that engulfed the entire continent in the early 20th century? Its disappearance is not just an unfortunate loss, but the final act in the tragedy of an entire empire. The latter half of the 19th century. Europe was in turmoil. Old empires were fracturing at the seams, and amidst their ruins, new nations were rising, eager to claim their place in the sun. Among them stood the nascent kingdom of Romania, a country that had achieved statehood and now desperately needed symbols to bolster its prestige. To the Romanian throne in 1866, a German prince, Carol of the Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen dynasty, was called, becoming King Carol I. In that political atmosphere, where the glitter of jewels was inseparable from the luster of power, the establishment of a royal treasury was not a whim, but a state imperative. To solidify the dynasty, the young monarch required a consort. The choice fell upon German Princess Elisabeth zu Wied, a refined, educated young woman with a poetic soul. Their marriage, solemnized in 1869, was primarily a political alliance, intended to legitimize the new ruling family in the eyes of Europe's monarchies. When the newly crowned Queen Elizabeth was poised to set foot on Romanian soil for the first time, the nation's aristocracy understood. This moment called for a grand gesture. A gift was needed that would simultaneously serve as a mark of respect, an oath of fealty, and a tangible symbol of her new status. The commission for such an epoch-making ornament was entrusted to a jeweler whose name perhaps didn't resonate as widely as Cartier or Fabergé, but within the inner circles of European nobility, it was synonymous with impeccable taste and virtuosic craftsmanship. Oskar Masin was a master of intricate architectural compositions. His style was marked by exquisite lightness and meticulous attention to detail. He had already crafted masterpieces for other royal courts, and the Romanian aristocracy knew he alone could translate their vision into metal and stone. The concept was simple yet ingenious. This was not meant to be just an expensive bauble. The tiara was conceived as a crown of recognition. A group of the most influential Romanian aristocrats commissioned Masin to create a diadem intended to be presented to Elizabeth on the day of her arrival in Bucharest. Thus, from its very inception, this ornament was not a personal jewel, but a political manifesto. It declared, "We, the nobility of this country, accept you. You are our queen." The design requirements were commensurate. The tiara had to be majestic yet understated, classical yet imbued with the contemporary elegance of the era. Masin was tasked with creating not merely a piece of jewelry, but a family heirloom capable of initiating a new dynasty's treasury. And he succeeded, crafting a masterpiece destined for a brilliant, though tragically brief, existence. Let's for a moment set aside the portraits and dry descriptions and imagine this masterpiece lying directly before us, on a velvet cushion, bathed in light. The first thing that captivates the eye isn't the sparkle of diamonds, but 16 majestic pearls. They are set vertically, like a line of honor guards, each in its own individual setting. This isn't a scattering, not a garland. It's a strict, almost architectural composition. Their shape, a perfect teardrop, and their flawless milky white color with a barely perceptible rosy overtone, which jewelers refer to as orient, speak to their supreme quality. Each pearl is the culmination of nature's multi-year labor, selected with incredible precision to form a perfect ensemble. Now, let your gaze descend to the base, and here the full genius of Oskar Masin is revealed. This isn't merely a metal framework studded with stones. It's an open-work lace of diamonds, woven with such virtuosity that the stones appear to float in the air, held by invisible threads. Masin was a master of what were known as airy settings. He minimized the visible metal, allowing light to penetrate the stones from all angles and ignite their inner fire. Hundreds of old-cut diamonds, each hand-faceted, create not the sharp, cold brilliance of modern stones, but a soft, vibrant shimmer, reminiscent of candlelight dancing on crystal pendants. This tiara is a true engineering marvel. Despite its impressive height and seeming massiveness, it was designed to be astonishingly light and comfortable to wear. Masin utilized platinum, a metal just beginning to gain popularity in jewelry at that time, for its strength and its ability to remain almost invisible beneath the diamonds. The intricate system of scrolls, volutes, and floral motifs hidden within the diamond lacework pays homage to the Belle Époque style, but executed with classical restraint. There is nothing superfluous. Every line, every curve serves the overarching design to elevate the pearls above the queen's head, creating the effect of a halo, an aura of power and divine origin. If we could touch it, we would feel its deceptive fragility and the cool metal. We would hear a faint, melodious chime if one of the suspended elements swayed. Its weight, estimated at several hundred grams, was equivalent not just to a sum of money, but to an entire era of jewelry artistry. Encoded within it were symbols: pearls as a sign of purity and high status, diamonds as a symbol of eternity and the indestructibility of power. Analyzing its design, one understands that this is not merely a headpiece, but a crown in miniature. Its vertical, upward-reaching structure was created to perfectly complement the tall hairstyles of the era and visually make the queen appear taller, more majestic. It didn't adorn, it crowned. It was not an accessory, it was a statement. In this tiara, Masin achieved an incredible balance. It is simultaneously austere and graceful, monumental and light, classical and utterly groundbreaking for its time. This was not simply a collection of precious stones, but a thought on the essence of royal power, frozen in metal and brought to life with the genius of a great artist. Imagine Bucharest on that day. The city, hushed in solemn anticipation, adorned with flags and garlands. The air was thick with excitement and curiosity, a nation preparing to meet its first new queen. For the young Romanian state, this was not merely a ceremonial visit, but a historic moment, an act of self-assertion on the European stage. And at the center of this grand spectacle was she, the young German princess, destined to become the face of the monarchy. When Queen Elizabeth, still quite young, stepped onto Romanian soil, all eyes were fixed on her. Her demeanor, austere and elegant, bespoke the reserved grace of northern courts. She was beautiful, but in her eyes, hope and trepidation likely mingled at the prospect of a new, unknown destiny. It was at this culminating moment, as she took her first steps as queen, that Oscar Massin's masterpiece made its debut. This was no clandestine transfer in the palace chambers. This was a public gesture, a meticulously choreographed act of political theater. A delegation of Romania's most influential aristocrats, dressed in their finest attire, approached the queen. In the hands of the eldest among them rested a precious casket. To the roll of drums and the hushed breath of the crowd, it was opened. And in that instant, the tiara appeared for the first time. They say a collective gasp of admiration rippled through the ranks. The diamonds flashed under the sun, and the pearls seemed to absorb all the day's brilliance. At this moment, an alchemical transformation occurred. The ornament ceased to be merely an expensive object. It became a crown of recognition. In accepting this gift, Elizabeth symbolically accepted the loyalty and devotion of the Romanian nobility. The tiara became the final flourish, completing her image. She was no longer simply Princess Zuvide, the king's fiancée. In the eyes of her people, she became their true crowned queen, and Massin's tiara was her first unofficial crown. The resonance of this debut was enormous. For the common people, it was a dazzling spectacle, confirming the grandeur and wealth of their monarchy. For the aristocracy, it was a demonstration of their own power and influence. And for foreign diplomats, who meticulously observed every move of the new court, it was a clear signal. The Romanian elite was united in its support of the throne and possessed both the taste and the means to make a statement. Thus, from its very first public appearance, the pearl tiara ceased to be a mere piece of jewelry and transformed into a legend, etched into the history of a nation's birth. If for Queen Elizabeth the tiara was a symbol of duty, majestic yet heavy, then for her successor it became the embodiment of passion. The era of the poetess on the throne gave way to the era of the Star Queen. After the death of Carol I and the ascension of his nephew Ferdinand to the throne, Romania gained a new ruler, Princess Marie of Edinburgh. And with her appearance, the most brilliant, most dazzling chapter in the history of the pearl tiara began, its true golden age. Marie was a person of an entirely different mold. The granddaughter of two emperors, British Queen Victoria and Russian Tsar Alexander II, she inherited assertiveness, a keen sense of style, and an innate understanding of how crucial image was for a monarch. She was dazzlingly beautiful, energetic, and possessed an unbreakable will. For her, jewels were not merely ornaments, but tools of power, a way to assert herself and her status, a weapon in the arsenal of her legendary charm. And when Oscar Massin's tiara transitioned into her jewelry box, it didn't just acquire a new owner, it found its soul. It was as if this masterpiece was forged solely for Maria. Its severe, majestic architecture perfectly complemented her regal bearing and piercing gaze. Where the reserved Elizabeth wore the tiara as a mere accessory of official protocol, the vibrant Maria made it an extension of her very being. She adored show-stopping jewelry, and this pearl diadem became the crown jewel of her own opulent collection. It was that rare alchemical fusion where object and person melded into a singular, indivisible image. It was in Maria's hands that the tiara truly soared to fame. Countless photographs and official portraits survive, showing the Queen adorned specifically in this very piece. She wore it with an inimitable confidence, pairing it with ropes of pearls and sumptuous gowns from the finest Parisian couturiers. The adornment crowned her head at coronations, state receptions, and family celebrations. She didn't merely don the tiara, she reigned in it. The vertical lines of the pearls accentuated her proud bearing, and the diamond's brilliance mirrored itself in her celebrated sapphire eyes. Thus, gradually, the tiara became Queen Maria's signature piece. Her image, reproduced on postcards and in magazines worldwide, propagated this iconic vision. The beautiful queen from the Balkans, resplendent in her majestic pearl diadem. She transformed a family heirloom into an internationally recognized and admired symbol of the Romanian monarchy. The jewel was no longer merely a gift from the aristocracy. It had become an integral part of the persona of one of her era's most captivating women. For Maria, who actively participated in political life and played a pivotal role in diplomacy during and after the First World War, this tiara was more than just an accessory. It was a symbol of legitimacy and continuity. Donning it, Maria wasn't merely showcasing her wealth. She was reminding the world of the dynasty's unbroken lineage, of her role as guardian of the throne and the nation's future. In her hands, the tiara lived its fullest, most brilliant life, forever enshrined in history as Queen Maria's tiara. Behind the dazzling brilliance of every great jewel, shadows almost always lurk, and the pearl tiara of the Romanian queens was no exception. Its story, seemingly so grand and majestic at first glance, was in fact marked by profound personal drama and quiet whispers that began even with its first owner. For Queen Elizabeth, this magnificent crown was not only a token of recognition, but also a symbol of a gilded cage. Her marriage to King Carol I was far from idyllic. They were strangers, brought together by political necessity. And soon after their wedding, terrible tragedies struck the family. Their only daughter, Princess Maria, passed away at the tender age of just 3 years old. This loss devastated the Queen. Perhaps that is why, in her eyes, the tiara, gifted to her as a symbol of new life and dynasty, became forever associated with unfulfilled hopes and personal sorrow. She appeared in it less and less frequently in public, preferring the solace of solitude and the world of literature to the sparkle of diamonds, a world where, under the pseudonym Carmen Silva, she could truly be herself. Thus, the first shadow fell upon the tiara, the shadow of silent grief. Of course, it's easy to succumb to the temptation of talking about some kind of curse, but the truth is far more prosaic, and therefore more terrifying. The tragedies linked to the tiara weren't mystical. They were profoundly human and historical. The real drama, which transformed the ornament into both legend and phantom, unfolded in the subsequent generation against the thunderous backdrop of a world war. By 1916, Romania found itself in a desperate plight, squeezed between warring empires. There was a very real threat of occupation and plunder across the nation. In this critical situation, Queen Maria and the government made what they believed was the only correct decision. The treasures of the Romanian crown, including her beloved pearl tiara, along with the country's gold reserves, had to be evacuated to a safe place. And what location could seem more secure than the vaults of the allied Russian Empire? Maria's mother, Maria Alexandrovna, was a Russian Grand Duchess, daughter of Emperor Alexander II. Russia wasn't merely an ally, it was a second homeland. This choice seemed impeccably logical. The precious crates, containing an entire fortune, gold, works of art, and legendary jewels, were dispatched by special train to Moscow and placed for safekeeping in the Kremlin's armory chamber. But history, as we know, delights in cruel jokes. In saving the treasures from one threat, the Romanian monarchy sent them directly into the jaws of another, far more dreadful one. Just 1 year later, revolution erupted in Russia. The Bolsheviks seized power, the imperial family was annihilated, and allied obligations crumbled into dust. The Romanian treasures, once a guarantee of safety, became a political hostage. The subsequent territorial dispute over Bessarabia definitively severed diplomatic relations between Romania and Soviet Russia. The Kremlin vaults slammed shut. The tiara, along with the rest of the jewels, vanished into history's black hole. An era of rumors and conjectures began. Was it sold at secret auctions to finance a global revolution? Disassembled for its stones and melted down like so many Romanov treasures? Or perhaps it survived and remains hidden to this day, somewhere deep within the Gokran, shielded from prying eyes? This mystery became the largest and most somber chapter in its story. With the roar of revolutionary volleys in Russia, the Pearl Tiara did not simply begin a new chapter, but entered a complete and irreversible oblivion. The end of its era was not a gradual fading, not an auction sale to the rap of a gavel, but a sudden, brutal severing. In an instant, from a treasure entrusted to an ally, it transformed into a trophy of a hostile regime, a silent hostage in the very heart of the new Soviet power. The wall that rose between Romania and Moscow proved impenetrable. For Queen Maria, this loss was not merely material. What disappeared was not an object, but a piece of her own myth, her royal identity. The tiara, in which she sparkled in portraits, which she wore during the most significant moments of her reign, now existed only in her memories and in photographs. One can only imagine her powerlessness and bitterness as she realized that her beloved adornment, along with other family heirlooms, had been forever swallowed by the chaos of history. It was a personal tragedy, unfolding against the backdrop of a global catastrophe, the end of an entire world that she knew and embodied. Thus began the tiara's long, agonizing life in the shadows. For decades, the Romanian government, and later the descendants of the royal family, made tentative and almost always futile attempts to reclaim what was lost. Endless diplomatic notes, requests, and negotiations all crashed against a deafening wall of Soviet silence or vague pretexts. The tiara transformed from a physical object into a phantom, a line in an archival list, a subject of political bargaining that never quite materialized. This era of oblivion became the longest in its history. It no longer sparkled at balls, no longer crowned royalty, no longer elicited gasps of admiration. It simply vanished. The last time this masterpiece's diamonds and pearls reflected light was the last time it fulfilled its purpose. Its epoch as a living, wearable ornament ended not in the hands of a new owner, but in the dusty silence of a Kremlin vault, becoming a symbol not of continuity, but of irretrievable loss. For decades, the Pearl Tiara was nothing more than a phantom, a legend locked away in archives and memories. It disappeared so completely and irrevocably that it seemed the world would never hear of it again. But history, having turned yet another page, prepared an unexpected, albeit incomplete, return to the world stage for this spectral treasure. This wasn't a triumphant appearance at a Christie's auction or in a museum display case. It was a second birth as a symbol, as the protagonist of a protracted historical drama. The breakthrough didn't happen immediately. The wall of silence erected by Soviet power seemed eternal. However, after the fall of the Iron Curtain and the change of political regimes, a faint hope dawned. A slow and torturous dialogue began regarding the fate of the Romanian treasures. Several acts of partial restitution became key events that brought the tiara back into the public eye. In 1935, and then again in 1956, the Soviet Union returned part of Romania's gold reserves and some cultural valuables. Each such gesture, though incomplete, became an informational bombshell. It was precisely these moments that constituted its second birth. Every time a new batch of treasures returned home, the question immediately flared up in Romania and across the globe. Where is the rest? Where are Queen Maria's jewels? Where is the pearl tiara? It returned to the stage, not in the spotlight, but in the light of political debates, newspaper headlines, and diplomatic notes. Its absence became louder than any presence. From a forgotten relic, it transformed into the most famous and most coveted artifact from the entire Romanian dossier. A radical reinterpretation of its essence occurred. If before the tiara was a symbol of monarchical power, beauty, and continuity, now its reading had changed. Today it is, first and foremost, a symbol of historical injustice, an unfulfilled promise, and painful national loss. Its image in old photographs ceased to be merely an illustration of a bygone era. It became evidence, the chief material proof, in a long-standing dispute between two countries. Thus, paradoxically, the tiara's value reached its zenith precisely in its vanished state. Its hypothetical financial worth, running into the millions, pales in comparison to its colossal historical and symbolic weight. It became something far greater than mere jewelry. It became a national idea, a dream of restored justice. And this return to the public consciousness, albeit as a phantom, marked its true culmination, transforming it from a queen's treasure into the treasure of an entire nation. So where is it now, this spectral tiara? The answer to this question remains one of the greatest mysteries in the history of royal jewels. Its official whereabouts remain shrouded in secrecy to this very day. Unlike treasures displayed in museums or sold at auctions, the pearl tiara has no physical address. The most probable and politically charged theory asserts that it, along with other unreturned Romanian relics, continues to reside deep within Russian state repositories, perhaps in the Gokran. There, it is no longer a mere precious object, but a political asset, an argument in an unfinished historical dispute, and its existence is a state secret. However, there is another, darker, and alas, highly plausible theory. In the 1920s, the Soviet government, desperately in need of currency, orchestrated a mass sell-off of imperial treasures. Many masterpieces were ruthlessly disassembled, stones extracted from their settings and sold individually to obscure their origins. The metal was melted down. It's entirely possible that Oscar Massin's tiara suffered the same tragic fate. In that scenario, it is lost to history forever, its beauty scattered into hundreds of anonymous diamonds and pearls dispersed across the globe. But regardless of its physical fate, the tiara's status has irrevocably changed. It ceased to be an accessory and transformed into a historical artifact, a document of an era. Today, it belongs not to a royal family, but to world culture and the history of the Romanian people as a symbol of lost heritage. Its empty place in the treasury speaks more about it than its brilliance in a museum display case ever could. It stands as a silent reproach and an eternal reminder of the fragility not only of human destinies, but of entire empires. To appraise its value today is virtually impossible because its worth is forged from incommensurable elements. Yes, there is the material value of flawless pearls and hundreds of diamonds. There is its immense artistic value attributable to the signature of the great master Oscar Massin. But all of this pales in comparison to its provenance. A tiara worn by two queens, a tiara that ignited a century-long diplomatic battle, it's not merely a piece of jewelry, it is an object of national significance whose historical value renders any financial appraisal meaningless. If it were to surface today, it would be priceless. At the very beginning of our journey, we posed a question. What is the true story hidden behind the cool shimmer of the pearl tiara of two Romanian queens? Now, having traced its entire trajectory from triumphant birth to tragic disappearance, we can offer a definitive answer. Its true history is not a chronicle of ownership, but a saga of metamorphoses. It was a symbol of recognition, then an instrument of power, later a hostage to politics, and finally, it became a phantom, a sacred relic of national memory. This tiara is a perfect example of how an inanimate object absorbs human passions and becomes their physical embodiment. Within its cold stones lie frozen the hopes of a young nation and the bitterness of a poet queen. In its diamond sparkle, the ambitions and indomitable will of a warrior queen were reflected. And in its sudden disappearance, the cruelty and chaos of an entire era that ground down empires and destinies. It became a silent witness to grandeur and tragedy, to dazzling beauty and ruthless history. Its destiny is a mirror, reflecting the history of Europe in miniature. Born in the age of national romanticism and the splendor of the Belle Époque, it reached its zenith before the First World War, only to be consumed by the fires of revolution and frozen in the icy silence of the Cold War. Every turn in its fate echoes the great upheavals that reshaped the world map. And herein lies the central paradox. Perhaps, had the tiara survived, returned to Romania, and taken its place in a museum display case, it would have been merely one among many beautiful exhibits. But it was precisely its loss, its martyred fate, that transformed it into something immeasurably greater. Its absence from the treasury rendered its presence in history absolute. It became a legend, not despite its disappearance, but because of it. Thus, Oscar Massin's pearl tiara achieved true immortality. It no longer depends on the preservation of its metal or the integrity of its stones. Its brilliance no longer requires light. It exists in old photographs, in the lines of diplomatic documents, in the debates of historians, and in the heart of a nation that continues to remember it and wait. It teaches us a fundamental truth. Some treasures are so monumental that the material world cannot contain them. Their value transcends the cost of stones and metal, becoming part of a cultural code, a symbol of an entire era. For true masterpieces never die. They merely pass into legend, to shine from there eternally, brighter than any diamond.